groundbreaking moment in terms of the quality of the conversation we've had on World Refugee Day. This is my third. And so first, the report on financial inclusion. It offers us a baseline around which now we have to begin to measure ourselves going ahead. How much are we doing well? And we've seen the red marks in that report, particularly on the savings, the fear of taking credit, but also could be related to many things. The savings, there's something to save because everything is spent on subsistence living. But also the cost of credit might be a challenge. So the kinds of instruments and products we offer, the kinds of new conversations we should have around addressing the opportunities gap for refugees, same as for the host communities, for me, it's really important. The second issue that stands out very clearly for me is the study that the ministry has conducted and Innocent very eloquently presented. My sister Isa will have to correct me. I'm not aware of any other country in the region, potentially in the entire continent, that has done such a study about integration. How do you integrate refugees? So all of the argument, the advocacy for refugees can be translated into implementation of that study. There's no better advocacy for where the kind of lifestyle, the opportunities we want refugees to have, for the aspirations they have, no better opportunity than when a country has conducted a study like this and goes out of its way to implement that study. And this study actually, it's anticipatory of where we are today as a global community. So I think it's excellent. Because if you look at trends, not just in humanitarian financing, but trends in development financing. Isati is our in-house expert on refugees issues and financing. There is no refugee appeal, no humanitarian appeal, so not just for refugees, migrants, displaced people, that the UN has launched in any part of the world in the last couple of years that has got even up to 60% financing. None. Because we go to the same people, the same institutions, many of them are here. So there's already some kind of fatigue, humanitarian fatigue, and there are multiple crisis contexts around the world. Some in their estimation more deserving than your own case, and so their ability to continue deepening into their treasury and putting money continues to shrink. So the humanitarian funding is not expected to increase because of the context where we find ourselves. That the same countries that are giving us money on humanitarian needs are also giving to us on development needs. But they also have their own internal challenges now. Internal challenges that also have dimensions on their own peace and stability and security. So many of them are diverting resources to areas of need within their own countries. So if we begin with that understanding that new monies may not come, it means reprioritization and refocusing of old money, but it means new approaches like Rwanda has done. So if they are even able to continue to give what they are giving, and we begin to use it in new ways that create sustainability and resilience, we will have more impact. So the argument will not be that we're asking them to give us more money so we continue to do the same old things. Because even the same old things are not enough for the needs of refugees. It's about being inventive and finding new ways that create transformation and create opportunity using the same resources. And if some of them do manage to give us new money, that will be fantastic. And you see this in the conversation that is happening at capitals around the world right now, but more so at UN headquarters stations. So whether it's Geneva, whether it's Vienna, whether it's Bonn, whether it's New York, or whether it's Nairobi, around the erosion of financing for both humanitarian interventions, but also for development. And that erosion for financing has immediate implications. We've seen that, the consequences on the health, in terms of the support that member states used to receive for health needs, but the bottom has basically fallen out on that particular need. And many NGOs, even here in Rwanda, have suddenly found, they woke up one morning and found that they've lost all their financing. So that's the challenge on the humanitarian sector. It's even more there on the development side. Because on the development side, what you now find is that because of these needs for the usual suspects who used to put a lot of money in the UN system, they have other priorities. The bottom has literally also fallen out. So now when we talk about ODA, grants is going to be a continuously shrinking portion of ODA, and concessional finance, even concessional finance is reducing as well. Now, if concessional financing is reducing, what it means for member states is that you have to start going to the capital market, where the cost of credit is high. So we, those of us from the developing world, from the global south, are in a crucial moment, an inflection point in terms of our own development aspirations, in terms of our own ability to respond to humanitarian needs, and how we finance the humanitarian interventions, but how we finance the development interventions. The assumed logic about why we are doing this together, the assumed logic about global solidarity is falling off the cliff, if I may use those terms. Because if you look at what brought us to where we are today, cast your mind back 80 years to what brought us to the end of the Second World War, about the rise of nationalism, about member states carving out theaters of influence and competing and going to war about it. That's what led us to the Second World War. What did we learn from the Second World War? What we learned is that globalization might be the response that shows the interconnectedness between all of us as peoples and communities. But what did globalization promote? It promoted prosperity. But prosperity of those with assets, with capacities, with skills. The consequence was that while it did promote prosperity, it created a lot of inequities and inequalities. So we had the United Nations system to help mitigate the inequities and inequalities in globalization, but without the authority and the capacity to enforce those decisions. So in a sense, over the last 80 years, we have done tremendous work as a UN system. But on the development side, a lot of the work has been more about brokering support from others to those who don't have, to enable them to meet up. It hasn't worked. For some countries, it hasn't worked for most countries. It created a sense of a flaw, like a social protection flaw, but never enough for the transformation that you need to see happen. Which is why some of my friends would even argue that what we're doing was managing poverty as a UN system. So where we are today is that countries have to take responsibility for their own development and come with the new thinking and the new approaches that create those transformations. Same for humanitarian interventions, but also same for development interventions. So what does it mean for us? What it means for us is that conversation can no longer be about resource mobilization. It has to be about resource leverage. Where are the resources that we can leverage? There are resources within, there are resources in our region, there are resources in commercial instruments, there are resources in foundations and equities who understand this, and there's still some resources in ODA, some, but not at the same level of magnitude. So what I hear us saying today is that what Access to Finance has done, the kinds of investments we need to be making with our refugee communities, we now need to ask ourselves, what kinds of financial products are coming out of our financial institutions? Because the problem is in the product. Because if the product is not right, the cost of credit will be too high. They won't borrow. But if you are a manager or owner of a financial institution, you want a return on investment for your investors. So the next frontier from today, and we have these two baselines, we now need a new conversation on financing products and returns on investment. That's what allows us to close the loop and address the challenges we're seeing here for the refugees. But also it has implications for what to do on the development side and how we work together going ahead. Last point I then want to make is that if we say that we are the critical inflection moment globally, and so humanitarian interventions are under challenge, under re-interrogation, same for development interventions also. We now need a new conversation with our partners in terms of how they are organizing their own contributions in these two spheres. If you take any of our major participant donors here, or partners, the humanitarian pot is different from the development pot. And very often they don't cohere. And because they don't cohere, the humanitarian pot always talks about emergencies. We have to respond to emergencies. It has to be imminent, potential threat to life and security. Now, some of these are refugees, they are legacy refugees. In many countries in the world where we continue to launch humanitarian appeals, they have been there for years, if not decades. Because the emergency has become a protracted emergency. It continues. It is still an emergency, but it is one that is perpetuating, becomes self-perpetuating itself. And then we have development ports that are supposed to now create the transformation that needs to happen. And if you think closely, both of them have the same objective. One is to give you the foundation you need to transit to the other, but they go in parallel tracks. So if we, as a global community, are reconfiguring at this moment in time in 2025, how we will save multilateralism, how we will address humanitarian needs, how we will show the real efficiencies and effectiveness of the nexus between humanitarian interventions and development interventions, and strengthen our global solidarity for refugees, but for all peoples around the world. We need an intersection point between the humanitarian port and the development port. Because it's that intersection point that is actually the logic of a nexus. But right now we talk about nexus only in terms of programming, where we do together, not in terms of conceptually and finance-wise. And then, of course, to say that for us as a United Nations system in Rwanda, we began early to anticipate these trends in terms of where we are headed as a global community. But we located our ambition to just Rwanda, because the pathway for us is the National Strategy for Transformation, NSC2, and where the government wants to go. For Rwanda to meet its aspirations to be middle income and upper middle income, it means that all of the great things that Rwanda has done in the last 30 years to bring it to where it is, it needs to even do different and bigger things for the next 20 to 30 years. So the degree of ambition is here. And so we have challenged ourselves as a United Nations system. Can we step up close to Rwanda's own degree of ambition? How we organize, what we do, how we do it, with whom we do it, and scale up at the level of policy, the analysis, the data, the knowledge, the expertise that focuses on addressing persistent and protracted development problems and helping be part of an ecosystem that finds a solution, but an ecosystem that brings all kinds of financing instruments together to address them. That's our new 5-year plan, which we signed recently with government. And I challenge all of us, that should be our ambition level for all of us that love Rwanda, want to help Rwanda, want to support this country to deal with these issues. Otherwise, it should not be perceived that you're helping people in the region, but then you're alone in that journey. So hats off to all the partners who have supported the government and the ministry in this work. Let's reconceive the new frontier for humanitarian interventions that allows this logic of resilience to actually have meaning in the lives of the refugees, but have meaning in terms of the government aspiration to address these issues. Thank you very much.